Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sweden, an Economic Overview by myself, Dominic McCraw. In today's presentation, I'll be going over Sweden, of course, doing an economic overview of it, specifically in its relation and comparing it to the United States, and at the end, we'll have a talk about Sweden's economic system. First, let's start off with the geographical and political background. Sweden is located in Northern Europe, specifically in Scandinavia. Now, Sweden has actually two types of government, a parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy. This is something that comes with its cultural background, as a lot of Scandinavian countries still have monarchs, although those are usually phased out as figureheads, just like in Britain. Sweden is also a member of the European Union, which is great for its economic trade and for trade within the region. And its capital is Stockholm. And here I have attached a nice little photo or map of Sweden. Now let's talk about the currency and the exchange rate. The currency in Sweden is the Swedish krona. And the exchange rate between it and the United States dollar is 9.5 krona for $1. And then in 2020, it was 9.8. As you can see here on this graph, it has fluctuated a lot. Around 2020, we saw a huge dip, and then it rose back up, and it was tumultuous for a little bit, and has dropped recently, most likely due to the United States' aggressive trade policy. Disposable income per capita in Sweden in 2023, it was around 44,500 US dollars, or not US dollars, but US dollars per person, PPP converted on the current prices. This is the unit that was used by my source. And the USA, it's $67,000. And a thing to note here is that outside of disposable income per capita, Sweden supports stronger welfare programs. So even if its citizens don't have as much disposable income, certain things are covered for them, such as healthcare if you don't have a private insurance through your company, or education, specifically higher education, or a number of other things. But we will continue to talk about that later. Population. Sweden's population is around 10.5 million. The United States is around 335 million. Now, comparing these two, Sweden is much smaller, but it's also a much smaller country. And the United States actually is only able to keep up its population and not decline due to immigration. However, it's been cracking down on immigration and allowing less immigrants, while Sweden, on the other hand, has been accepting more immigrants from other areas in comparison to the United States, where the U.S. has slowed down. Sweden has kind of sped up. Now, personal and corporate tax rates. For these, I tracked income tax. Swedish income tax is anywhere from 29% to 35%, and the United States income is anywhere from 10% to 37%. I got these numbers from the official Swedish government's website. Now, the corporate tax rate is 20.6%, whereas in the United States is 21%. However, not represented here are other types of taxes, and Sweden, it should be noted that it used to be much higher and that has been brought down recently, although this is also true for the United States. Gross domestic product, Sweden in 2023 got around, this is wrong here, it should say 2024. My apologies, I changed it. Sweden in 2024 had $610.12 billion in gross domestic product, and the United States has $29.18 trillion, which is quite a bit more. In 2020, it was about $538 billion for Sweden and $21 trillion for the United States. So both of our domestic products have risen, not at the same rate, but they've both grown about with inflation. A little bit less, a little bit more, give or take. GDP growth rate. The Swedish growth rate is around 1% in 2024, and the USA's is about 2.8%. In 2020, the GDP growth rate was particularly bad. In Sweden, it was negative 2%. In the United States, it was negative 2.2%. Now, Yes, both have recovered and we're both in the positive now, but Sweden is recovering a bit slower than the United States did. This is due to a number of factors, including the fact that they didn't bounce back as quickly. The United States industry was able to adapt to a lot of online work, and a number of other factors, such as welfare states and change in domestic policy based on the United States president. Business cycle position. Sweden is an early recovery, a slow expansion. Low growth, stabilizing inflation is what their focus is right now, and we're out on a similar path to the United States because the world in general at the moment is recovering from COVID, which means that everyone is trying to get stable again before they can take riskier decisions. Inflation rate. In 2024, the Swedish inflation rate was about 2.8%. In USA, it was 2.9%. This is a pretty big difference from 2020, where Sweden had 0.5% inflation rate and the United States had a 1.2. You can see here in 2022, there was a peak inflation rate for both countries. This is a spike across a lot of data sets, but you can see how it jumped and then has dropped back down, and it seems to be stabilizing itself. The unemployment rate. Sweden in 2024 had an unemployment rate of about 8.5%, while the USA had 4.1%. However, these numbers are incorrect again. I apologize. That's supposed to say 2020 in both of those. Sweden in 2020 had an unemployment rate of about 8.3%, and the USA had an unemployment rate of about 8.1%. This is, of course, due to COVID, and you can see how we've both bounced back since then. However, Sweden's has remained unusually high compared to the United States. Public debt. For Sweden in 2024 was about 33.5% of the GDP. This is much, much less than the United States, which is about 124% of the GDP. This is because Sweden has more conservative fiscal policies, and Sweden also has less foreign involvement than the United States, where the United States is consistently putting itself farther into debt through large spending bills, through the hope of bringing money back. This is something the United States is allowed to do because it is a larger country and because it is the global backing currency for a lot of banks. So they're allowed to play with debt a little bit more than someone like Sweden would be. Natural resources. Sweden is known for its natural resources in iron ore, timber, and hydropower. Sweden has a pretty robust green energy network, and it's a pretty big industry for them. Forests cover about 70% of the land. However, they are mostly privately owned, and they have a strong renewable energy focus because they are a more liberal country with a more educated populace, which tends to mean that they will vote for more liberal and more leftist policies in regards to the environment, whereas places like the United States tend to be more conservative and tend to put more of our money into non-renewable energy due to the large investment and the large industry of non-renewables that exist here in the States and our exports of oil and natural gas. Imports and exports. Sweden imports machinery, petroleum, and electronics, and exports vehicles, machinery as well, and iron and steel. These are different types of machinery, of course. The Swedes are known for their iron and steel because it is such high quality, and if you're in the market for steel specifically, you should probably look into buying Swedish steel. As far as the things they import, obviously not the same type of machinery that they export, but they mainly import petroleum because there is not a lot of petroleum in Sweden, and alongside their environmental regulations, and electronics. This is pretty much across the board. Every country imports electronics because the majority of them are manufactured in China and Taiwan. Specifically, Taiwan produces a lot of microprocessors. Trading partners. The top export markets are Germany, Norway, and the United States, and they have a lot of imports from Germany, China, and the Netherlands. This is the reason that Germany is on both of these, is because Germany and the Netherlands and Norway are all on this because it is part of the EU, meaning that they have very ease of trade in the EU with EU nations. As far as exports, they export a lot to the United States. We see this a lot in the United States trade deficit because we have a lot of imports, because due to most of the United States, exports are military weapons or services. We have a lot of tech companies here in the United States which export their services. And as far as imports, China is a big one, which is true with most countries. And as we saw in the imports that the Sweden gets, a lot of this is machinery and electronics. Sorry, I had a little brain fart there. Apologies. Trade agreements. The EU is a single trade EU single trade participant. EU trade deals with 70 plus nations and indirect EFTA benefits. The Swedish nation is a part of the EU, and it being in the EU and a member of another number of other organizations, because it is an OECD nation, allow it to have amazing trade benefits and be a very financially stable nation that has a healthy trade market. Industries and conclusion. The key industries are automotive, telecom, and green tech. Swedish emphasizes equity and innovation, while the United States emphasizes growth and competitiveness. The guiding philosophies between Sweden and the United States are different. While they are both capitalist nations, Sweden emphasizes a lot of equity programs, meaning that they have strong social welfare programs, and they want to make sure that each and every one of their citizens is living an equitable and honorable life. In Sweden, they also have a lot more social programs and things that are paid for, such as healthcare, education, and a lot of Sweden's taxes go back into these public services. Whereas in the United States, a lot of our tax dollars go into subsidies for corporations, which allows that growth and competitiveness that the United States is trying to foster. And it also goes into supporting our allies overseas, due to the United States' position as not only a smaller country, but the United States has a lot of burden as because it's put itself in the position of a global police force and been very involved in a lot of other nations, which has led to it having less equitable social programs, because that money is going elsewhere, and we in the United States like to push for privatized pretty much everything. And we've seen this as effects in certain industries where it has been a large benefit, and then in other industries such as the healthcare industry, where unless you have cancer, you are not in the best place for healthcare, because it can be extremely expensive. If you do have the money, though, then the United States has some of the best healthcare in the world. This is because, whereas in Sweden is trying to serve it towards everyone, the United States is all about profit. And while that is good for fostering innovations and things in the industry to help reduce costs and try to be on top of the corporate hierarchy or on top of your industry, it means that sometimes the consumer gets the short end of the stick. Well, that is my presentation on Sweden. I hope you have enjoyed. Here's my bibliography. Here are all of my sources. This has been a fantastic project for me. I hope that you all have enjoyed, and I hope you all have a nice day.